$5 million. That is exactly what my own parents and siblings lost when they decided my life's work belonged to them. They thought stealing my company would be their golden ticket to high society. Instead, I handed them a one-way ticket to absolute bankruptcy. Let me tell you how. Nobody ever tells you that the people most likely to stab you in the back are the ones sitting across from you at Thanksgiving. My name is Capriel Mercer, and 7 years ago, I started a clean skincare brand called Mercer Botanicals out of my tiny, un-air-conditioned apartment. I was 23, broke, and obsessed with developing organic formulations that actually healed cystic acne. I spent every waking hour researching, testing, failing, and trying again. For the first 2 years, I didn't sleep. I lived off instant noodles and poured every single dime I made from my day job as a barista into sourcing high-grade, cold-pressed oils from small farms. When I finally perfected my flagship product, a restorative night serum, demand exploded overnight thanks to a viral review from an unpaid beauty blogger. Suddenly, I was drowning in orders. I needed capital to scale, to secure a real manufacturing facility, and to hire a team. That is when my father, Reuben Mercer, stepped in. My father was an old-school, iron-fisted traditionalist who ran a moderately successful regional logistics company. He offered me a $50,000 loan to get a warehouse and scale production. But my father never did anything out of the goodness of his heart. He insisted that, for liability and tax purposes, we form an LLC where he held a 51% stake. He assured me it was just on paper. It's family, Capriel, my mother, Patricia, had cooed, pouring me a cup of tea. Your father just wants to protect you in case the business fails. You know how volatile these little internet hobbies can be. I was naive. I was exhausted, and I trusted them. I signed the operating agreement without consulting an outside lawyer. Fast forward 5 years. Mercer Botanicals wasn't a little internet hobby anymore. We were doing nearly $4 million in annual recurring revenue. We had just hit a $5 million valuation based on a recent acquisition offer I had turned down. I had a beautiful 10,000 square foot facility, a dedicated team of 40 employees, and a massive distribution deal with Crescent Beauty, one of the largest retail chains in the country. I had built an empire from absolute scratch. Meanwhile, my older brother, Arthur, had just tanked his second tech startup. Arthur was the golden boy, the one who got the expensive MBA paid for in cash by my parents, while I had to take out student loans. He was arrogant, completely devoid of original ideas, and suddenly unemployed. My younger sister, Beatrice, was a 20-something aspiring influencer whose entire career consisted of spending our parents' money on designer bags and posting heavily filtered photos from luxury resorts. I should have seen the storm brewing. It happened on a rainy Tuesday evening. My mother invited me over for a special family dinner. I arrived exhausted after a 14-hour day at the warehouse, looking forward to some of my mother's famous roast chicken. Instead, I walked into the dining room to find my father, my mother, Arthur, Beatrice, and a man I didn't recognize wearing a cheap suit. "Capriel, sit down," my father commanded, not looking up from his scotch. There was no roast chicken. There were only stacks of legal documents scattered across the mahogany table. "This is Thomas Wright," my father said, gesturing to the man in the suit. "He's the new corporate counsel for Mercer Botanicals." I blinked, my stomach dropping. "New counsel? What are you talking about? I didn't hire a new lawyer." Arthur leaned back in his chair, a smug, self-satisfied grin plastered across his face. "You didn't? The board did." "The board?" I laughed. though panic was starting to claw at my throat. "Dad and I are the board." "Actually, Capriel," Thomas Wright spoke up, his voice dripping with rehearsed condescension. "Per the operating agreement you signed 5 years ago, Reuben, as the majority shareholder, has the right to restructure the executive suite to ensure the optimal financial trajectory of the company. Effective immediately, Arthur Mercer is stepping in as the chief executive officer." The room spun. I looked at my mother. Patricia simply picked up her glass of Chardonnay, her eyes focused on a spot on the wall just above my head. She couldn't even look at me. "Arthur," I sputtered, standing up. "Arthur doesn't know the first thing about skincare. He doesn't know our supply chain. He doesn't know our margins. He doesn't even know what hyaluronic acid is. He just bankrupted a crypto app." "Watch your mouth, Capriel," my father snapped, slamming his glass down. "Your brother has an MBA. He understands macroeconomics. You've done a cute job getting this little lotion business off the ground, but you're too emotional to take it to the next level. Arthur is going to prepare the company for an IPO. And I'm taking over as Vice President of Marketing," Beatrice chimed in, practically bouncing in her seat. "Your current Instagram feed is so boring, Capriel. It's just pictures of plants and lab beakers. I'm going to pivot us to a luxury lifestyle aesthetic. I've already drafted contracts to sponsor my friends' trips to Tulum." I felt like I was suffocating. "You're stealing my company," I whispered, the reality crashing down on me. "Don't be dramatic," Arthur scoffed, adjusting his cuffs. "You're still going to be here. We're graciously keeping you on as head of product development. Your salary is capped at $80,000 a year, which is more than fair for someone without a graduate degree. You just have to report to me and run all new formulas through my desk for cost analysis approval." I looked at the documents. They had completely diluted my 49% stake through a series of legal loopholes and shell company transfers that Thomas Wright had orchestrated. I was left with a non-voting 5% share. The company I had bled for, cried for, and built with my own 2 hands had been hijacked by my own blood. "We're doing this for you, sweetheart," my mother finally murmured, placing a cold hand on my arm. "You always look so stressed and tired. Now Arthur can carry the heavy burden of running the business, and you can just play with your essential oils in the lab." I didn't yell. I didn't cry. The absolute, sheer audacity of their betrayal burned away my tears, leaving behind nothing but cold, hardened ice. I looked around the table at the family I had loved and trusted. They didn't see me as a daughter or a sister. They saw me as a workhorse, a cash cow they could finally put out to pasture so they could feast on the profits. "Okay," I said quietly, my voice eerily calm. "Okay, Arthur. You're the CEO." Arthur smirked, clearly disappointed that I wasn't putting up more of a fight. "Glad you're finally seeing reason, little sister." What Arthur didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Mercer Botanicals was not a machine that could run itself. It was an ecosystem held together by sheer willpower, personal relationships, and 1,000 tiny threads that only I knew how to navigate. If they wanted the throne, they could have it. But I was going to make sure the castle burned down around them. For the next 3 weeks, I played the part of the defeated, submissive employee perfectly. I showed up at the warehouse at 9 a.m. instead of my usual 5 a.m. I moved my things out of the corner executive office and into a windowless closet near the loading dock, making way for Arthur. Arthur immediately went to work destroying everything I had built. His first act as CEO was to bring in expensive Herman Miller chairs and espresso machines for the executive team, which consisted entirely of himself and Beatrice. His second act was to declare that our profit margins were unacceptable for a tech-adjacent wellness brand. "Capriel, come in here," Arthur barked over the intercom one morning. I walked into what used to be my office. Arthur was sitting behind my custom oak desk, feet propped up, looking at a spreadsheet. "Our COGS, cost of goods sold, is a disaster," he lectured, pointing a pen at me. "You're spending a fortune on this organic, cold-pressed rosehip oil from a supplier in France. I found a chemical broker in New Jersey, Garrison Chemicals, that can provide a synthetic alternative for literally 1/10 of the price." I kept my face perfectly blank. The cold-pressed rosehip is the active healing ingredient in our flagship serum, Arthur. If you swap it for a synthetic filler, it's going to break people out. The texture will change, the smell will change, and the efficacy will drop to zero. Consumers don't know the difference. Arthur waved his hand dismissively. They buy the brand, not the ingredients. Make the swap. I've already cancelled the contract with the French supplier. My heart did a little leap of dark joy. The French supplier, a stubborn, brilliant botanist named Gerard, only did business with me. I had spent 2 years buttering him up, learning basic French, and proving my dedication to his sustainable farming methods before he agreed to sell to us. Arthur had just rudely cancelled a handshake deal that a massive corporation couldn't even buy their way into. "Whatever you say, CEO," I nodded dutifully. Down the hall, Beatrice was busy detonating our marketing strategy. Our core demographic consisted of women in their 30s and 40s looking for serious, science-backed skincare. Beatrice immediately fired our brilliant, data-driven marketing manager and replaced her with 2 21-year-old TikTokers. Within a week, the Mercer Botanicals social media accounts were flooded with tone-deaf, hyper-filtered videos of teenagers dancing with our serums, captioned with slang that our actual paying customers didn't understand. Sales began to dip almost instantly. But the real trap, the absolute fatal blow I was preparing to deliver, centered around our massive distribution deal with Crescent Beauty. Crescent Beauty was responsible for 65% of our revenue. Getting our products onto their shelves had been a grueling 18-month negotiation. Because I was a young, unproven founder at the time, Crescent's hard-nosed procurement director, a woman named Diane, insisted on a specific clause in our vendor contract. It was a key person clause. The contract explicitly stated that Crescent Beauty was doing business with Capriel Mercer, based on my specific formulations and quality control. If I were to ever leave the company, be terminated, or be demoted from having final say over product quality, Crescent Beauty had the right to terminate the massive vendor agreement immediately, with 0 penalty, and demand full refunds for any unsold inventory. I knew Arthur hadn't read the contract. He thought vendor agreements were legal jargon beneath his pay grade. On my 30th day under Arthur's reign, the first batch of the newly formulated, cheapened night serum rolled off the production line. I tested it on the back of my hand. It was greasy, it smelled faintly of plastic, and it left a nasty residue. It was garbage. I walked into Arthur's office. Beatrice was lounging on the sofa, scrolling through her phone. "Arthur," I said, dropping a piece of paper on his desk. "I'm resigning, effective immediately." Arthur barely looked up from his monitor. "Really, Capriel? Throwing a tantrum? Fine. We don't need you to mix lotions anyway. Beatrice has a great idea to just white label some stuff from China next quarter. Go ahead and leave. You won't see a dime of equity." "I know," I smiled, a real, genuine smile. "I'll clear out my desk." Before I left, I did exactly 2 things. First, I packed up my personal notebooks. These contained the proprietary formulas for our next 3 product lines: an eye cream, a vitamin C serum, and an exfoliating mask. Because I had technically never signed a non-compete or an IP assignment agreement during the original rushed LLC formation with my father. Those formulas belonged legally to me, not the company. Second, I picked up my cell phone and called Diane at Crescent Beauty. "Diane, hi, it's Capriel," I said smoothly as I walked out the warehouse doors and into the bright sunshine. "I just wanted to formally notify you that, as of 5 minutes ago, I am no longer with Mercer Botanicals. The new management has severely altered the core formulas using synthetic fillers, and I can no longer guarantee the quality or safety of the products heading to your stores." There was a long, heavy silence on the other end of the line. "I see," Diane said, her voice turning to absolute ice. "Thank you for letting me know, Capriel. We will be enacting the key person clause immediately." I hung up the phone, got into my car, and drove away. I left my family sitting on a throne of gasoline, completely unaware that I had just struck the match. The real fallout was about to begin, and it was going to be biblical. Arthur's first reaction to the Crescent Beauty cancellation was predictable: arrogant rage. He instructed our new corporate counsel, Thomas Wright, to draft a heavily worded cease and desist letter to Diane, threatening to sue Crescent Beauty for breach of contract. Diane didn't even flinch. She forwarded the letter to Crescent's lead litigation attorney, a notorious corporate shark named Jonathan Crane. Jonathan responded with a single, brutal email citing the exact subsection, paragraph, and line of the key person clause, accompanied by a demand for an immediate refund of $1.2 million for the unsold inventory currently sitting in Crescent's regional distribution centers. Because the contract stipulated that refunds must be issued within 30 days, Arthur was suddenly staring down the barrel of a massive cash flow crisis. Instead of realizing he was out of his depth, my brother doubled down. He ordered the warehouse to ramp up production of the newly formulated, cheapened night serum, convinced that Beatrice's marketing strategy would drive enough direct-to-consumer sales to cover the gap left by Crescent Beauty. It was a catastrophic miscalculation. Beatrice had burned through our entire quarter's marketing budget in 3 weeks. She had paid exorbitant fees to fly 6 D-list reality television stars to a luxury resort in Cabo San Lucas, Mexico, just to post selfies holding our bottles by the pool. Not a single post highlighted the product's benefits, ingredients, or science. The conversion rate from her campaign was less than 0.1%. She had spent $250,000 to generate roughly $4,000 in sales. But the real nightmare began when the new formula actually reached our loyal, long-term customers. Within a week of the new shipments going out, our customer service inbox, which was now being managed by a single, underpaid intern because Arthur had slashed the support staff, was flooded. The synthetic rosehip oil from Garrison Chemicals was highly comedogenic. Customers who had trusted Mercer Botanicals to heal their cystic acne were suddenly breaking out in severe, painful rashes. A prominent dermatologist on TikTok, Dr. Simon Garber, who had previously praised my original formulation, purchased a new bottle to review. He posted a scathing 6-minute takedown video. He tested the pH, exposed the cheap synthetic fillers, and publicly declared that Mercer Botanicals had sold its soul for a quick buck. The video hit 4 million views in 2 days. The fallout was apocalyptic. Chargebacks hit our merchant accounts so fast that our payment processor froze the company's funds, suspecting fraud. A class action lawsuit was filed in federal court by a group of women who had suffered severe contact dermatitis from the new formula. By month 3 of Arthur's reign as CIEO, the $5 million valuation I had built was nothing but dust. The company was bleeding cash. The French supplier, Girard, publicly blacklisted the brand, meaning they couldn't even revert to the old formula if they tried. Desperate, Arthur turned to our father. Reuben Mercer, who had orchestrated this entire coup to protect his investment, was forced to secure a massive, high-interest line of credit using his own regional logistics company as collateral just to keep the lights on and pay off the refund demand from Crescent Beauty. My mother, Patricia, who had wanted me to rest, was now answering customer service emails at 2 a.m, frantically typing apologies to furious women with burned skin. They tried to call me, of course. My father left aggressive voicemails demanding I come back to fix the mess I created. Arthur sent emails alternating between offering me a meager consulting fee and threatening to sue me for sabotage. I didn't answer a single one. I was too busy building my real empire. 9 months. That was all the time it took for my family to completely dismantle a booming, multi-million-dollar empire. Watching it happen from the outside was like watching a slow-motion car crash, except the drivers were violently fighting over the steering wheel while heading straight for a cliff. When the debt became mathematically insurmountable and the class action lawsuit threatened to pierce the corporate veil and ruin my father personally, the inevitable happened. Mercer Botanicals officially filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. A court-appointed trustee swept in, seized the remaining assets, padlocked the warehouse doors, and announced a public auction to liquidate everything to pay off the furious creditors. The absolute ruin of my family was swift and merciless. My father's regional logistics company, once his pride and joy, was now teetering on the edge of insolvency due to the massive, high-interest loans he had desperately leveraged to save Arthur's sinking ship. Arthur, whose expensive MBA had proven utterly useless in navigating a real-world supply chain crisis, was forced to quietly move back into my parents' guest room, his tail tucked firmly between his legs. Beatrice, unable to handle the relentless online mockery for bankrupting a beloved brand in record time, deactivated her social media accounts and vanished from the public eye. While they were drowning, I was building a lifeboat. When I walked out of Mercer Botanicals all those months ago, I didn't just go home to lick my wounds. I took my proprietary formulas, the exact ones my family had legally failed to secure during their sloppy corporate coup, and pitched them directly to Crescent Beauty. Diane, the procurement director who had always believed in my vision, was furious at Arthur's gross incompetence. She desperately wanted my high-quality, authentic products back on her retail shelves. It was Diane who made the life-changing introduction. She connected me with Sylvia Hawthorne, a ruthless but brilliant billionaire venture capitalist and angel investor who specialized in female-founded wellness brands. Sylvia didn't care about my family drama. She cared about the math, the science, and my unyielding drive. After a grueling month of due diligence, Sylvia backed my new venture, Aura Botanica, to the tune of $3 million. This time, I was the sole founder. I retained 80% equity, and there were absolutely no family members lurking in the shadows to steal my crown. The day of the bankruptcy auction arrived on a bitterly cold, overcast morning in late November. The sky was the color of bruised iron. I walked through the heavy oak doors of the downtown courthouse wearing a sharp, tailored navy suit, my heels clicking rhythmically against the marble floors. Inside my designer briefcase rested a certified cashier's check. I wasn't walking alone. Flanking me on my right was Sylvia Hawthorne, radiating quiet, billionaire authority. On my left was Diane, representing the massive retail power of Crescent Beauty. We were a united front of women who actually knew how to build and sustain an empire. We entered the auction hall and took our seats near the back. A few rows ahead, my family sat huddled together like survivors of a shipwreck. When they heard the heavy doors close and turned to see who had arrived, the remaining color completely drained from their faces. The physical toll of the last 9 months was glaringly obvious. Arthur looked pale, unkempt, and 10 years older. My mother, usually draped in immaculate designer clothing, looked shrunken and exhausted, unable to even lift her head to meet my gaze. My father stared at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of profound shock and sheer, venomous anger. Arthur scrambled up from his chair and stalked over to our row, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. "What are you doing here, Capriel?" he hissed, his voice trembling with humiliated rage. "Come to gloat over the family's misfortune? Come to watch us lose everything?" I looked up at him, my expression perfectly serene. "No, Arthur," I replied softly, my voice perfectly level. "I came to go shopping." Arthur recoiled as if I had slapped him, stumbling back to his seat, just as the trustee called the room to order. The auction was swift and brutal. The Mercer Botanicals trademark, now completely toxic and associated with chemical burns, was essentially worthless. But the physical infrastructure, the infrastructure I had painstakingly designed and built, was pristine. When the manufacturing equipment, the raw material inventory, and the lease takeover for the massive 10,000 square foot warehouse were put on the block, I raised my paddle. I bought it all. Using the capital from Aura Botanica, I reclaimed my custom-built centrifuges, my state-of-the-art lab equipment, and my immaculate packaging lines for exactly 12 cents on the dollar. As the gavel came down with a sharp crack, finalizing the sale to Aura Botanica LLC, my father snapped. He shoved past the chairs, his face a terrifying shade of purple, and marched straight up to my row, ignoring the warning glare of the court security guard. "You planned this," Reuben seethed, pointing a visibly trembling finger inches from my face. "You sabotaged the company. You let your own brother fail so you could swoop in and steal it all back. You cost us $5 million, Capriel." I stood up slowly, calmly adjusting the lapels of my blazer. I looked at the man who had tricked his own daughter out of her life's work, the brother who had gleefully stolen my office, and the mother who had watched it happen over a glass of wine. I felt no pity. I felt absolutely nothing but the cool relief of justice. "I didn't sabotage anything, Dad," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the suddenly dead-silent auction hall. "I just stopped doing your work for you. You thought you could steal a machine and run it without the engine. You didn't buy a company, you bought a logo. I am the company." I turned my gaze to Arthur, who was staring fixedly at the floor, utterly and completely defeated. "I warned you about the French supplier. I warned you about the synthetic fillers. You didn't listen because you thought a piece of paper made you smarter than the person who actually built the brand. Enjoy the bankruptcy." I turned on my heel and walked out of that courthouse into the biting November wind. I never spoke to my parents or my siblings ever again. Today, Aura Botanica is valued at $15 million. We are stocked in every Crescent Beauty nationwide, and Gerard, my beloved French botanist, exclusively supplies our organic farms. My family tried to cut me out of my own business to climb into high society, but all they managed to do was dig their own financial grave. Sometimes, the hardest lessons come from the people who share your last name. My family tried to bury me, but they didn't realize I was the seed that grew their entire garden. Now, they have nothing, and my new empire is thriving. If you loved this story of absolute karma, please hit that like button, share this video, and subscribe to the channel for more incredible real-life drama.